The summer sun was beginning to set over downtown Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Officer James Miller let out a tired sigh as he adjusted his police cap, his 12-hour shift nearly complete. At 42 years old, with 15 years on the force, he thought he had seen everything the streets could offer. But that Wednesday evening in June would prove him wrong. The clock on his dashboard read 6:45 p.m. as he parked his police cruiser near Central Park, a regular spot for his end-of-day patrol. He reached for his lukewarm coffee, only to pause mid-motion. Through his side mirror, he noticed two small figures slowly approaching his vehicle. They were identical twin girls, probably around 8 years old, wearing matching blue cotton dresses that had seen better days. Their black hair was neatly braided, though some strands had come loose, suggesting the hairstyles were a few days old. What caught his attention most was their unusual behavior. They walked with small, hesitant steps, constantly looking over their shoulders as if afraid someone might see them. Officer Miller watched as they whispered to each other, one twin clearly trying to encourage the other. Their small hands were tightly clasped together, knuckles white from the grip. As they got closer, he could see their sneakers were worn out, with small holes near the toes. Following standard procedure for any approaching civilians, Miller rolled down his window but kept his other hand visible on the steering wheel. "Hello there," he said in his gentlest voice, the one he used when talking to his own nieces. "Is everything okay?" The slightly taller twin, by maybe half an inch, gave her sister's hand a squeeze before looking up at Officer Miller. Their brown eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. For a moment, they just stood there, seemingly gathering courage. The girls couldn't have looked more identical, same round faces, same dark brown eyes, same small nose, and even the same tiny scar above their right eyebrows. Yet Miller noticed subtle differences in their expressions. The slightly taller one appeared more determined, while her sister seemed more anxious, partially hiding behind her twin. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, it was probably only 30 seconds, the braver twin spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but those two words carried enough weight to change multiple lives forever. "Help us." Officer Miller had heard many cries for help throughout his career, from dramatic shouts to angry demands, but something about these two simple words, spoken so softly yet with such desperation, made his heart skip a beat. In his line of work, officers were trained to be suspicious, to look for tricks or traps, but his instincts told him these children were genuinely in trouble. He slowly opened his car door, making sure not to startle them. As he stepped out, the more nervous twin took a small step back, but her sister held firm, keeping their hands locked together. Miller knelt down to their level, maintaining a careful distance to avoid frightening them further. "My name is Officer James Miller," he said softly, pointing to his name badge, "but you can call me James. Can you tell me your names?" The twins exchanged quick glances, having one of those silent conversations that only twins seem capable of having. The braver one spoke again, her voice a bit stronger this time. "I'm Sophia," she said, then gestured to her sister. "This is Sarah. We're the Thompson twins." Sarah, still partially hidden behind her sister, gave a tiny nod of confirmation. Their eyes darted between Officer Miller's face and his badge, as if making sure he was really a police officer. Miller noticed other details now, the slight trembling of their hands, the dark circles under their eyes that no child should have, and most concerningly, the way they kept looking around as if expecting someone to appear. Their dresses, while clean, showed signs of being slept in, with small wrinkles and creases in telling places. "Are you from around here?" he asked, already noting that he'd never seen them in this neighborhood before. Sophia shook her head. "We walked here," she admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper again. "From Riverside Apartments." Miller's eyes widened slightly. Riverside Apartments were over 3 miles away. What could make two young girls walk such a distance alone? As he looked at their tired faces and nervous expressions, he knew this was just the beginning of what promised to be a much bigger story. What he didn't know yet was that these two brave little girls, with just those two simple words, "Help us," were about to start a chain of events that would not only change their lives, but would transform an entire community's understanding of hope, trust, and the true meaning of protection and service. Officer Miller led the Thompson twins to a nearby bench, making sure they could still be seen by other people to help them feel safe. He radioed his position to dispatch, letting them know he was talking to two young girls who might need assistance. Sarah, the shyer twin, had finally stopped hiding behind her sister, but she still hadn't let go of Sophia's hand. "When was the last time you saw your mother?" Miller asked gently, pulling out his small notepad. His training told him to document everything, but he kept his movements slow and casual to avoid scaring the girls. Sophia looked at her sister, then counted on her fingers. 2 days ago, she said quietly. Monday morning. Mama left for work at the hospital where she cleans at night. She said she was going to her second job after that at the grocery store, but she never came home. Sarah nodded, speaking up for the first time. Her voice was softer than her sister's but carried the same worry. "We tried calling her phone, but it keeps going to that voice lady who says to leave a message." Miller felt his heart sink. 2 young girls, alone for 2 days. It went against everything in him as both a police officer and a human being. "What about other family members?" he asked, already typing a message to his partner to run a check on missing persons reports. "Just Grandma Rose," Sophia explained, her brave facade cracking slightly. "But she's in the hospital because her heart is sick. We tried calling her room, but the nurse said she was sleeping and couldn't talk." Sarah's stomach suddenly made a loud growling noise, causing her to blush and look down at her feet. Miller noticed both girls had the same worn-out sneakers, probably hand-me-downs they shared. "When did you last eat?" he asked, already reaching for his lunchbox in the cruiser. He always packed extra food, a habit from his own childhood when meals weren't always guaranteed. "Yesterday morning," Sophia admitted. "We had cereal, but then the milk went bad. We found some crackers too, but they're all gone now." As Miller handed each girl half of his turkey sandwich and an apple, he watched how they carefully divided each portion exactly in half between themselves. It was clear this wasn't the first time they'd had to share limited food. Between small bites of sandwich, their story came out piece by piece. Their mother, Teresa Thompson, worked 3 jobs: night cleaning at the hospital, daytime shifts at a grocery store, and weekend work at a laundromat. She usually left them money for food and called multiple times a day to check on them. But this time, something was different. "We watched this police show once," Sophia explained, finishing her apple down to the core. "It said if you're in trouble, find a police officer. They help people. So we waited 2 days like Mama taught us. Then we decided to find help." Sarah nodded earnestly. "We got dressed in our best dresses," she added softly. "Mama says to always look neat when you go out. We brushed our teeth and everything." Miller felt a mix of emotions: pride at their resourcefulness, anger at the circumstances that forced such young children to be so grown-up, and worry about their mother. 8-year-olds walking 3 miles alone through Atlanta was dangerous enough to make him shudder. As he listened, he noticed other details. Despite their situation, both girls spoke clearly and intelligently. Their backpack, which Sarah had finally set down, was full of school books and notebooks with completed homework. On the front pocket, he spotted several honor roll patches. "We do our homework every day," Sophia said, following his gaze. "Mama says education is the most important thing. We're going to be doctors when we grow up." Miller nodded, his respect growing for both the girls and their absent mother. This wasn't a case of neglect. Everything pointed to a hard-working single mother doing her best to raise 2 bright daughters, and something had gone terribly wrong. He pulled out his phone and showed them a picture of his badge. "I'm going to help you find your mama," he promised. "But first, I need to ask you some more questions. Can you be brave for a little longer?" The twins looked at each other, having another one of their silent conversations. Then they both turned to him and nodded in unison. As Miller began asking more detailed questions about their mother's workplaces and schedule, he couldn't shake the feeling that these 2 young girls, forced to grow up too fast, were about to teach him more about courage than his 15 years on the force ever had. The evening sky had darkened considerably as Officer Miller watched the Thompson twins finish their impromptu dinner in his patrol car. After calling in their situation, he stopped at Joe's Diner, a local restaurant where he was a regular. The owner, seeing the tired young girls, had quickly prepared hot chicken soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and chocolate milk. "Slow down a little," Miller said gently, watching the meat as if they feared the food might disappear. "There's plenty more if you're still hungry." His mind wandered to his own childhood when his single mother had worked multiple jobs too. The memories made this case feel personally important. While the girls ate, Miller noticed their backpack was unzipped, revealing several school papers. Would you mind if I look at your schoolwork? He asked, wanting to learn more about their lives. Both girls nodded, their mouths full of grilled cheese. What he found inside the bag surprised him. There were perfectly completed math worksheets, book reports written in neat handwriting, and science projects that showed remarkable understanding for third-grade students. Most impressive were their report cards, straight A's for both girls. Miss Johnson says we're the best readers in class, Sarah said shyly, speaking up more now that she felt safer. We help other kids sometimes. Sophia nodded enthusiastically. We love the library at school. Mama takes us to the public library on Sundays too, when she's not working at the laundromat. It's our special time together. Miller pulled out a drawing from their folder. It showed two girls in white doctor coats, with stethoscopes around their necks. The detail was impressive for 8-year-olds. That's us when we grow up, Sophia explained proudly. I want to be a children's doctor, and Sarah wants to fix hearts like the doctors helping Grandma Rose. These are really good, Miller said sincerely. How long have you wanted to be doctors? Since we were 5, Sarah answered, gaining confidence. Our mama got sick once, and the doctor at the free clinic was so nice. She even gave us candy and let us listen to Mama's heart with her stethoscope. As they talked, Miller's fellow officer, Maria Rodriguez, arrived to help with the case. She sat with the girls while Miller stepped aside to make some calls. The hospital where Teresa worked confirmed she hadn't shown up for her shift on Monday night, very unusual for her. The grocery store said the same thing. Returning to the car, Miller found Rodriguez showing the twins pictures of her own daughter on her phone. The girls were giggling for the first time since he'd met them, looking more like typical 8-year-olds. Officer Miller, Sophia called out, her face becoming serious again. Is our mama in trouble? She never stays away this long. She always finds a way to call us. Miller sat down next to them. We're doing everything we can to find her, he assured them. But right now, I need to know something important. Would you trust me to take you somewhere safe for the night? The twins looked uncertain. We're not supposed to go anywhere with strangers, Sarah whispered. That's very smart. Rodriguez praised them. But we're police officers, and we need to make sure you're safe while we look for your mother. There's a nice place where other children stay sometimes when their parents can't be home. Miller watched as the girls had another of their silent twin conversations. Then Sophia spoke up. Can we stay together? Of course, Miller promised. You won't be separated. Before leaving for the children's center, Miller made one last stop at their apartment with another officer. The girls waited in the car with Rodriguez while they checked inside. The apartment was small but incredibly neat. On the refrigerator, Miller found dozens of drawings, perfect test papers, and a carefully planned schedule in Teresa's handwriting showing her work hours and the girls' activities. On the kitchen table, he found something that made his throat tight, a half-completed application for a better-paying hospital job, and brochures for a scholarship program at a private school known for its science program. This wasn't just another case anymore. Miller knew he had to go beyond his usual duties to help this family. As he drove the girls to the children's center, he was already forming a plan. These bright young girls and their hard-working mother deserved more than just finding out what had happened. They deserved a chance at a better future. Looking in his rearview mirror at the twins, now sleeping against each other in the back seat, Miller made a silent promise. He would not only find their mother, but would make sure this family got every opportunity they deserved. The next morning began with intense activity at the Atlanta Police Department. Officer Miller had barely slept, spending most of the night coordinating with hospitals and checking traffic cameras near Teresa Thompson's usual route to work. The twins' worried faces kept appearing in his mind, driving him to work harder. We've got something, announced Detective Sarah Martinez, rushing to Miller's desk with a printout. A minor car accident was reported Monday night at the intersection of Pine and 4th Street. The driver was taken to Mercy Hospital, but there was confusion about her identity because her purse was stolen at the scene. Miller's heart raced as he looked at the accident report. The description matched Teresa Thompson, African-American woman, early 30s, wearing a blue hospital cleaning uniform. The time matched when she would have been heading to her second job. The responding officer says the driver was disoriented from hitting her head. Martinez continued, pointing to the notes. She kept trying to make a phone call, but her cell phone was damaged in the crash. When they took her to the hospital, she was having trouble remembering phone numbers. Miller immediately grabbed his coat. "Which room at Mercy?" he asked, already heading for the door. But Martinez wasn't finished. "There's more," she said, following him. The accident wasn't exactly random. Two teenagers on bikes rode out suddenly in front of her car. When she swerved to avoid them, she hit a pole. While she was dazed, they took her purse. It looks like they might have targeted her. In the car, Miller called Officer Rodriguez, who was staying with the twins at the children's center. "We might have found their mother," he told her. "Can you bring the girls to Mercy Hospital? But don't tell them anything yet. We need to be sure." The drive to Mercy Hospital felt endless, even with his police siren on. Miller's mind was racing. If this was Teresa Thompson, she had been in the hospital for almost 3 days while her daughters waited at home, scared and hungry. The thought made him press the accelerator harder. At the hospital, Miller found room 412 and knocked softly. A tired-looking woman lay in the bed, her head bandaged. She turned toward the door, and Miller knew immediately this was the twins' mother. They had her same gentle eyes. "Mrs. Thompson?" he asked gently. "I'm Officer James Miller. I need to talk to you about Sophia and Sarah." Teresa Thompson's eyes went wide with panic. She tried to sit up quickly but winced from pain. "My girls. Are they okay? I've been trying to call them, but my phone, and I couldn't remember our new number, and my head was so fuzzy from the medicine." Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "Your daughters are safe," Miller assured her quickly. "They're very brave and smart girls. When they couldn't reach you, they found a police officer, me, and asked for help. They're on their way here now." Teresa collapsed back against her pillows in relief, still crying. "I was so worried. The nurses said I had a concussion. Everything was confusing, and I couldn't think straight. I kept telling people I had to call my girls, but without my phone and with my head injury." She looked at Miller with desperate eyes. "Are they really okay?" Before Miller could answer, excited voices came from the hallway. "Mama, Mama!" The twins burst into the room, Officer Rodriguez right behind them. They rushed to their mother's bed but stopped short, afraid of hurting her. "My babies," Teresa sobbed, carefully opening her arms. The girls gently hugged her, all three of them crying now. Miller and Rodriguez stepped into the hallway to give them privacy, but they could hear Teresa repeatedly apologizing and the girls telling her about their adventure finding help. Outside the room, Miller updated Rodriguez on the accident details. "Those teenagers who caused the crash, I want them found," he said firmly. "This family has been through enough." Rodriguez nodded in agreement. The security cameras at the intersection caught good images of their faces. "We'll find them." Miller looked back through the door window at the reunited family. Teresa was holding her daughters close, looking much better already just from seeing them. The twins were showing her their latest schoolwork, trying to catch her up on everything she'd missed. This part of the story, finding Teresa, was complete. But Miller knew their work wasn't done yet. This hard-working mother and her brilliant daughters deserved justice, and more importantly, they deserved a chance at a better life. The real challenge was just beginning. The hospital room slowly filled with morning light as Teresa Thompson continued holding her daughters close, despite the pain from her injuries. Officer Miller stood quietly by the door, watching the family reunion while making notes in his small notebook. Each detail he observed told a bigger story about this remarkable family. "Mama, why is your head wrapped up?" Sarah asked softly, carefully touching the white bandage around her mother's forehead. Teresa winced slightly but maintained her smile. "It's just a bump, baby," she assured her daughter. "The doctors say I'll be fine in a few days." She turned to Officer Miller, her eyes filled with gratitude and worry. "I need to call my jobs. They must think I abandoned them. And the hospital bills." Her voice trembled slightly. Miller stepped forward, pulling up a chair. "Mrs. Thompson, we've already contacted your employers. The hospital supervisor actually came by yesterday when she heard what happened. She's holding your position, and the grocery store manager said the same thing." Teresa's shoulders relaxed slightly, but concern still lined her face. "The bills. I was saving for the girls' school supplies, but now..." She looked down at her hospital gown, trying to hide her tears from her daughters. Sophia, always the more outspoken twin, squeezed her mother's hand. "We can use our old backpacks, Mama. They're still good." Sarah nodded in agreement, showing wisdom beyond their 8 years. Miller watched this exchange, reminded powerfully of his own childhood. His mother had made similar sacrifices, working multiple jobs to provide for him. The memory sparked something in him, a determination to do more than just file a report and move on. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, pulling out some papers from his folder. "While investigating your case, we discovered something interesting. The teenagers who caused your accident have been targeting other hardworking people in similar situations. Because of this, there's a victims' compensation fund that can help with your hospital bills." Teresa's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really? But are you sure I qualify?" Miller nodded firmly. "Absolutely. Also, the hospital has a program for cases like yours. The social worker will be here this afternoon to help you apply for assistance." As he spoke, Miller noticed the twins had pulled out their school books and were quietly doing homework in the corner. Even in this stressful situation, they remembered their mother's emphasis on education. Teresa noticed his gaze and smiled proudly. "They never miss a day of school," she said softly. "I work so hard because I see how smart they are. They deserve every chance." Her voice broke slightly. "When I was in here, confused and hurting, I kept thinking about them. Not being able to call them was torture." Officer Rodriguez, who had been standing quietly by the door, stepped forward. "We found your purse, Mrs. Thompson. Those teenagers dropped it while running away. Everything's there except the cash, and we're working on catching them." Teresa nodded gratefully, then turned back to Miller. "How did my girls find you?" she asked. "They must have been so scared." Miller smiled, glancing at the twins. "They walked 3 miles to find a police officer because they watched educational shows about safety. They were scared but incredibly brave. You've raised remarkable daughters, Mrs. Thompson." The proud tears in Teresa's eyes matched the ones Miller had seen countless times in his own mother's eyes. Single parents doing everything possible to give their children a better life. It was a story he knew well. "Mama," Sophia called from the corner, "can Officer Miller visit us sometimes? He gave us food and told us stories about his police dog while we waited for news about you." Teresa looked at Miller questioningly. He found himself nodding before she could ask. "I'd be honored," he said sincerely. "These girls reminded me of why I became a police officer in the first place." As the morning progressed, more hospital staff came to check on Teresa. Each person who entered the room noticed the same thing: 2 young girls doing homework while their mother rested, and a police officer who seemed more like a guardian angel than a civil servant. Miller knew this case would stay with him forever. In trying to help this family, he had found something he didn't realize he was missing: a reminder of his own past and a chance to make a real difference in 3 lives. The best part was, he knew this was just the beginning of their story. 2 weeks after Teresa Thompson's accident, Officer James Miller sat in Police Chief Washington's office, nervously adjusting his uniform. On his lap was a thick folder filled with research, statistics, and a detailed proposal he'd spent countless hours preparing. "So, Miller," Chief Washington said, leaning back in his chair, "you want to start a new community support program because of the Thompson case?" His expression was neutral, but his eyes showed interest. Miller nodded, opening his folder. "Chief, the Thompsons aren't alone. There are hundreds of hardworking single parents in our community struggling to make ends meet. Mrs. Thompson was working 3 jobs, yet her brilliant daughters had to walk 3 miles alone to find help." He spread out several papers on the chief's desk. "I've identified 20 local businesses willing to participate in a job training program. The community college is offering free classes for working parents. What we need is a way to connect these resources with the families who need them." Chief Washington picked up one of the papers, his eyebrows rising. "You've already gotten support from the mayor's office." "Yes, sir," Miller replied confidently. "And there's more. Remember those honor roll patches on the Thompson twins' backpack? Their school principal told me they qualify for the gifted program, but couldn't afford the extra materials needed." Just then, a knock on the door interrupted them. Officer Rodriguez entered, leading Teresa Thompson and the twins. They had been invited to this meeting, though they didn't know why yet. The girls were wearing new school uniforms, donated by a local church, and Teresa's head bandage was finally gone. "Mrs. Thompson," Chief Washington stood up, greeting them warmly. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you," Teresa replied. She looked healthier, though still tired. The hospital found me a better paying position in their administration office. One job with benefits instead of 3 jobs with nothing. Sophia and Sarah ran to Officer Miller, giving him quick hugs. They had grown attached to him over the past weeks, as he regularly checked on their family and helped Teresa navigate various assistance programs. "Girls," Miller said, smiling, "why don't you show the chief your latest test scores?" The twins proudly pulled out their papers, showing straight A's across all subjects. Chief Washington examined them, clearly impressed. "Officer Miller tells me you want to become doctors." "Yes, sir," they answered in unison. Sarah, usually the quieter one, added, "We're going to help people, just like Officer Miller helped us." The chief's expression softened. Turning to Teresa, he asked, "Mrs. Thompson, would you be willing to share your story at our next community meeting? Officer Miller has proposed a new program, and your experience could help other families." Teresa looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. But what program?" Miller stood up, suddenly energized. "It's called the Bridge Program. We're connecting struggling families with better job opportunities, educational resources, and community support. Your story showed us how many families just need a bridge to cross from surviving to thriving." He turned to the twins. "And thanks to a Police Foundation grant, we have scholarships for gifted students. Would you two be interested in attending the science-focused program at Riverside Academy?" The girls' eyes went wide, and Teresa gasped. "But that's one of the best schools in the city," she whispered. "Exactly," Chief Washington said firmly. "These girls deserve the best education possible. Our community needs more doctors, especially ones who understand the challenges many families face." Teresa started crying happy tears as the twins hugged her. Miller watched, remembering his own mother's tears when someone had helped him get a college scholarship years ago. "There's more," Rodriguez added, opening her laptop. "We're setting up a mentorship program. Several doctors from Mercy Hospital have volunteered to mentor students interested in medicine. The Thompson twins will be our first participants." As the meeting continued, more details of the Bridge program were discussed. Local businesses would provide job training and guaranteed interviews. The police department would offer safety workshops and community outreach. Churches and charities would help with immediate needs like food and clothing. Looking at the happy faces around him, Miller felt a deep sense of satisfaction. One small encounter with 2 brave little girls had sparked something much bigger. The walls between police and community were starting to come down, replaced by bridges of understanding and support. When the twins hugged him goodbye that day, Miller knew he'd done more than just help one family. He helped create a program that would change countless lives, all because 2 young girls had trusted a police officer enough to say those 2 simple words: "Help us." 6 months after the Thompson twins first approached Officer Miller's patrol car, the community center's main hall was packed with people. Local news cameras lined the back wall, all focused on the small stage where Sophia and Sarah Thompson stood behind a podium, their mother Teresa beaming proudly from the front row. "Before we met Officer Miller," Sophia began, her voice clear and confident despite the large crowd, "we thought police officers were scary. But now we know they can be like family." Sarah nodded in agreement, holding her sister's hand for support. The audience included an interesting mix of people: police officers in uniform, business owners in suits, doctors in white coats, and families from all around Atlanta. They had gathered to celebrate the 6-month success of the Bridge program, which had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. Mayor Johnson stood up next, holding a report in his hands. "In just 6 months," he announced, "the Bridge program has helped 57 families find better jobs, provided educational support to over 100 children, and most importantly, built trust between our police department and the community." Officer Miller sat quietly in the back, watching it all unfold. He thought back to that evening when 2 scared little girls had approached his car. Who could have guessed their simple request for help would lead to such big changes? The success stories were remarkable. Teresa Thompson now managed the hospital's cleaning staff, supervising 30 employees and earning twice her previous income. The twins were thriving at Riverside Academy, where their science projects had won first place in the school fair. But they weren't the only success story. Mrs. Jackson, a single mother of 3, stepped up to share her story next. "When I lost my job," she said, wiping tears from her eyes, "I was too proud to ask for help. Then I saw Teresa Thompson on the news talking about the Bridge program. Now I'm learning computer programming at the community college, and my kids have mentors from the police department. The program had created ripple effects throughout Atlanta. Local businesses reported higher employee retention rates. School attendance improved. Crime rates in participating neighborhoods dropped significantly. But most remarkably, the relationship between police officers and community members had transformed. Officer Rodriguez, now the program's co-director with Miller, shared some surprising statistics. Last month, she reported, we had 35 community members volunteer to join our police auxiliary program. 20 of them were teenagers who used to avoid police officers completely. The transformation wasn't just in numbers and statistics. You could see it in small, everyday moments. Police officers being invited to family barbecues, kids running up to patrol cars to share their report cards, former program participants returning to mentor new families. Even the 2 teenagers who had caused Teresa's accident had been caught and changed by the program. Instead of facing harsh punishment, they were given the chance to join the youth mentorship program. Now they helped younger kids stay out of trouble and find better paths forward. As the celebration continued, various speakers shared their experiences. Dr. Martinez from Mercy Hospital talked about mentoring the Thompson twins and other students interested in medicine. A local business owner described how program participants have become his best employees. A retired teacher explained how the after-school tutoring program had improved students' grades across the district. The biggest surprise came when Chief Washington took the stage. The Bridge program has been so successful, he announced, that 5 other cities have asked to implement similar programs. Officer Miller will be traveling next month to help them set up their own versions. Miller hadn't expected this announcement, but the proud looks from the Thompson family made his heart swell. Sophia and Sarah had made him special cards for his travels, decorated with little police cars and medical symbols. The evening ended with a community dinner, where police officers and families sat together, sharing food and stories. Miller found himself at a table with Teresa and the twins, watching as Sarah explained her latest science project to a rookie officer while Sophia discussed medical terms with a visiting doctor. You know, Teresa said quietly to Miller, that evening when the girls went looking for help, I was so scared in the hospital, thinking I had failed them. But now I see it was a blessing in disguise, not just for us, but for so many families. Miller nodded, watching the diverse crowd interact like old friends. The walls that had once divided the community were truly coming down, replaced by bridges of understanding and support, and it had all started with 2 brave little girls who dared to ask for help. The local newspaper's headline the next day would read, Bridge Program Transforms Community, How 2 Young Girls Started a Movement. But for Miller, the real headline was written in the smiles, hugs, and handshakes he saw all around him, proof that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of courage. On a bright spring morning in 2029, Officer James Miller, now Sergeant Miller, parked his patrol car outside Riverside Academy. The school looked different from 5 years ago. New science labs had been added, and the Bridge program's success had brought in enough funding for a complete renovation. But what really caught his eye was the large banner hanging over the entrance. Congratulations to the Thompson twins. Early admission to pre-med program. At 13, Sophia and Sarah Thompson had grown taller, but they still wore matching outfits and held hands just like they did on that fateful evening 5 years ago. Today, they were leading a group of younger students through the school's annual career fair, wearing junior volunteer badges from Mercy Hospital. And this is where we first learned about DNA in 5th grade, Sophia was explaining to the group, pointing at the science lab. Now we help teach the younger kids about science every Thursday after school. Sarah, still slightly quieter but equally confident, added, Our mom always says education is the key to helping others. That's why we started the homework help program at the community center. Miller smiled, remembering how much had changed. The small community center where he first taken the hungry twins was now a 3-story building named the Bridge Center, offering everything from job training to medical checkups. Teresa Thompson was its executive director, having left her hospital administration job to run the rapidly growing program full-time. Sergeant Miller. Both girls called out when they spotted him. Even as teenagers, they still ran to hug him, though now they reached his shoulders. Their student group watched in amazement. These brilliant 8th graders who were already taking high school classes were friends with a police sergeant. "Sorry I missed your early admission celebration," Miller said, pulling two small packages from behind his back. "I was helping set up the bridge program in Chicago, but I brought you something special." Inside each package was a junior police badge, modified to include a medical caduceus symbol. The girls' eyes lit up as they pinned them to their shirts. 5 years ago today, Miller announced to the student group, "These young ladies changed our community by being brave enough to ask for help. Now they're changing it by helping others." It was true. The Thompson twins had become local celebrities of sorts, but not for the usual teenage reasons. They volunteered 20 hours each week, splitting time between tutoring younger children, helping at the hospital, and giving tours to visitors from other cities interested in copying the bridge program's success. Teresa appeared from her office, looking professional in a business suit, quite different from the exhausted woman in hospital cleaning scrubs Miller had met years ago. "Are you all ready for the big announcement?" she asked, smiling mysteriously. They moved to the center's main hall, which was filling up with families, police officers, and community members. Chief Washington, now nearing retirement, stood at the podium with the mayor. "5 years ago," the chief began, "two little girls showed us that building bridges between police and community could change lives. Today, the bridge program operates in 50 cities across America, but today's announcement is even bigger." He gestured to Teresa and the twins to join him on stage. "Thanks to a major grant from the National Health Foundation, we're establishing the Bridge to Medicine program. Starting next year, we'll provide full medical school scholarships to students from underprivileged backgrounds who commit to serving their communities." The crowd erupted in cheers. Sophia and Sarah hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. Their dream of becoming doctors, once seemingly impossible for two little girls from a struggling single-parent family, was now within reach not just for them, but for others like them. Miller watched from the side, his own eyes misty. The scared little girls who had whispered, "Help us," were now confident young women helping others. Teresa, once working 3 jobs just to survive, was now leading a national movement for community change. After the ceremony, as families mingled and celebrated, Miller found himself sitting with the Thompsons at their usual table. The twins were excitedly discussing their plans to start pre-med classes while still in high school, while Teresa showed him proposals for expanding the program to more cities. "You know," Sarah said suddenly, turning to Miller, "we never really thanked you properly for that first night, for believing in us." Miller shook his head, smiling. "You had it backwards all along," he replied softly. "I should thank you. Those 2 words you said, 'Help us,' they didn't just change your lives, they changed everything." Looking around at the crowded community center, at the police officers playing basketball with teenagers, at former program participants now returning as volunteers, Miller knew it was true. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest voices, and the strongest bridges are built by those brave enough to reach out for help.